What do Minecraft, Mount and Blade, and Europa Universalis have in common? I'll answer that first question in a bit. First, I want to talk about the game you're looking at right now. This little widget is called Superflight. You may or may not have heard of it. I briefly saw it being streamed a couple years back, thought it looked neat, and picked it up on stream. And what you see here is basically the entire game. You glide around and gain points based on how close you get to walls, flying through narrow gaps, and other stunty nonsense. It's a game I don't spend a lot of time on, but it's a go-to when I'm upset and need to take a bit to calm down. But the reason I bring it up here is that Superflight also fits in with that list of games I gave at the start. See, aside from the general instruction of fly around and get points, Superflight doesn't really give you a goal. You don't win, and you don't even really lose. I honestly have no idea what the intended way of playing it is. Are you meant to try and rack up as many points as possible without dying? Or just glide around and relax? There's no defined objective. Maybe your map has one weird little section of gaps that you think you can just barely maneuver through if you time it right. I've spent half an hour trying to just barely clip a wing on walls to get the character model to bug out. All perfectly valid ways of playing the game. And that's kind of the beauty of it. You can start playing without any real goal in mind and organically just end up locked in on something. Now, let's move away from Superflight to a game that's a bit more well-known, and what I actually want to talk about today. For those who don't recognize it, this is Europa Universalis 4, which will henceforth be referred to as EU4. It's a grand strategy game / historical simulator set from 1444 to the early 19th century. It would be almost impossible for this game to be more different from Superflight. Superflight is a calm flight sim physics game with exactly 4 controls: up, down, left, right. EU4 is a labyrinthine hellhole where the simple action of declaring war requires 4 years at university to fully understand the rules and consequences of pushing the big red button. This is a list of the map modes, meaning at some point the developers expect each and every one of these could be vital information you'll need at a glance at some point. Want to know how armies actually work beyond just click guys with guns, click where you want them to point those guns? Well, here's some math. You get the idea. For all its nonsense though, EU4 is probably my second favorite strategy game of all time. And it comes down to one essential reason. You cannot win EU4. I don't mean just because it's a hard and overly complex game, I mean you literally can't beat it. Like Superflight, EU4 does not have a win condition. You can colonize and conquer the entire world, but you'll not get a victory screen. Instead, you play either until your country is wiped out, or you reach the end of the game's timeline, at which point you'll receive a score, which I personally don't pay much attention to, some details about your playthrough, and a not particularly interesting procedurally generated description of your nation's timeline. This one thing, not the complexity, not the historical detail, not whatever attempts at realism the game might aspire to, is what sets EU4, and other games from the same developer, apart from something like Civ. When you play Civ, you're playing to fulfill some arbitrary objective. Conquer everything, get to space first, get everybody to buy your music? You play to win, and every choice you make is meant in some fashion to gain more resources, and then funnel them into completing one of the series of requirements that the game decides count as winning. EU4 drops you into the world in control of a nation of your choice. It gives you a brief description of the historical context, the particular rules for your nation's religion and government type and the like, and maybe a suggestion or two as far as first moves go. But it only really hands you one objective: survive. You don't expand, or conquer, or form alliances to win. You do it so that when England, Spain, or the Ottoman Empire starts sizing up your territory and your fictional citizens, you can give them a smack on the nose and spook them off. All the management or keeping unrest down or economy fiddling is just part of keeping the country you're playing strong enough to survive. And because of this, a lot of the game feels more organic. In Civ, you go to war because you're the war civilization, and you're not going to win by outsciencing or culturaling everybody else, so Aztecs are going to do what Aztecs are going to do. But in EU4, Sure, Europe, you enjoy that 30 years war you're busy with, don't really care about the religious state of the Holy Roman Empire, just going to keep on colonizing here. Wait a minute, Denmark's involved? Alright, I'm in. Time to get them back for sinking all my boats 10 years ago. There are, of course, other games that rely pretty extensively on a lack of objectives and open-endedness. Sandboxes like Minecraft or Terraria are obvious ones that simply could not work if they tried to hammer on a singular win condition, but there's also things like the Bethesda RPGs, which basically only work if you treat them as a big RPG sandbox to explore/murder hobo your way through and pay basically no attention to the main plot. But I always find it more interesting when applied to a genre where you wouldn't necessarily expect it from. Obviously, a game based almost entirely on building things will give you a lot of freedom to pick your own goals, but a grand strategy game? That's why I spent so long going on about EU4. Well, that, and I've put a lot of time into it, and you all are going to share in my suffering. One more thing before this big, pointless soliloquy comes to an end. I want to talk about the drawbacks of this kind of design, both when implemented poorly and even when done well. This is Mount & Blade. It's a fun little medieval warfare game where you play as a mercenary with no other objective than killing people and getting as fabulously wealthy as possible. And I will, now and then, go back to it and really try to enjoy it. But I always end up at least mildly disappointed. Not just because of the jank, but because there aren't really any reasonably attainable objectives at all. You can take on quests or just wander the map picking fights with people to gather money, but it's always in fairly small chunks for the effort and expenses involved, except tournaments, which are thoroughly broken and exploitable. You can work towards better gear, but armor and weapons get exponentially more expensive with incremental increases in stats. You can try and build up your army, but, well, get in one real fight and you're likely to lose far more in good troops, and thus the time and effort spent training them up, than you'll get from loot or other rewards. You can join a faction, but your ability to actually make any sort of difference in that faction's wars is fairly limited. I still kind of like it, but I like it for the simple joy of riding around and lancing people in the face. Everything built around that feels like a slog. Even when a game's lack of direction is done well, though, it comes with its own sort of problems. When a player is free to approach things however they want, often what will happen is they'll always gravitate towards the aspect of the game that's most enjoyable for them or avoid mechanics they don't really understand. Which is fine, but it means that repeated playthroughs will often end up looking a lot more alike than you'd maybe expect. Almost every EU4 game I play ends up going a little something like this. Okay, I'll just start a nice, calm, easy game. No blobbing, not trying to conquer all of Europe or anything. Oh hey, one of my neighbors I'm not allied to just got their army wiped out in another war, and I do have a bunch of admin points I'm not doing anything with yet. Franz, get the war declaring trumpets. Well, that was a fun, easy war. Wonder if I've missed anything while I was focused on that. Oh hey, Muscovy's exploding in rebels. I wonder what happened there. Oh, they're heavily in debt and low on manpower? Well then. And so on. It's just that war, and the various bits and bobs involved in setting up wars and breaking up your rivals' alliances, is the most engaging bit about the game, so you'll typically wind up doing it a lot. In Minecraft, you dig and scavenge and get yourself better gear until you've got a ton of extra resources lying around, and use them to make something cool. In Mount & Blade, you go around picking fights with bandits and looking for tournaments until you've leveled up a bit and can afford a proper sword and a shield that isn't just a trash can lid taped to your arm. Then you... This can happen even when you start with a particular goal in mind. Right, I'm going to start as one of the Mongol hordes and reconquer China. What's that mean? Oh, buddy up to the strong guy and eat everything else around you until you're big enough to turn around and eat them too. How unique. So, this kind of thing really only works when a game allows for weird twists on the details of how things play out to make a major difference. Mount & Blade's openness doesn't work because it doesn't really matter that the game spawned a nice, easy 1,000 gold quest for you early on. You'd have gotten that sooner or later anyway with a bit more grinding. But finding a big dungeon full of treasure to loot, if you can gear yourself up properly first and fight your way through? Stumbling on a cool-looking valley that you could use to make a cliffside fortress? Suddenly having a personal union with France, giving you both the largest army in Europe and a very large vassal state you're going to need to keep loyal, along with a lot of land that the other major powers are going to want? These things create adventure. Create stories that might not exactly be book material, but are at least interesting in the moment. The point, if you will, of open-ended games isn't necessarily that you can do anything in them. It's that any number of things could happen, and each of those little variations can lead down any number of different experiences. If you've stuck through it this long, thanks for watching. And if nothing else, I've hopefully at least introduced you to a game or two you might find fun. Thanks, and cheers.